Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at today's program featuring artist Ann Lee, presented as part of the Wignall Museum's Home Edition. Home Edition is a series of curated artist talks, workshops, and discussions featuring artists and cultural workers. My name is Rebecca Trewick, and I serve as the director and curator of the Wignall Museum. The Wignall Museum is a teaching museum and interdisciplinary art space that introduces Chaffey College students, faculty, staff, and community members to innovative contemporary art objects and ideas. By fostering critical thinking, visual literacy, discourse, and empathy, the museum seeks to enhance the intellectual and cultural life of our community. We want to take a moment to recognize that we are situated on the Rancho Cucamonga campus of Chaffey College, which resides on the traditional and unceded lands of the Tongva people. We offer our recognition and respect to the elders, both past, present, and future.
And hello, my name is Roman Stollenwerk. I'm assistant curator at the Wignall Museum. Visit us at www.chaffey.edu/Wignall to access our full schedule of programs and available recordings. When possible, recordings are made available on our website. Announcements post to our email subscribers and social media when new videos are available. All recordings on our site include captions and audio descriptions as options. You can follow us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Wignall Museum. Visit our website About Us page to sign up to receive email announcements. We also ask that you complete a brief survey after the session at tinyurl.com/Wignall Spring 21 Visitor Survey. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Hadel. I'm the preparator at the museum. In a moment, Ann Lee will present for about 30 minutes or so, with the remaining time being available for Q&A.
Thanks, Roman. Thanks, Andy. So today I have the pleasure of introducing our guest artist, Ann Lee. Ann Lee received her BFA from Cal State Fullerton and her MFA from Cal State Long Beach. Lee's work explores identity, culture, family history, and the duality of becoming Vietnamese American in her work. Inspired by the cultural context in her life, Lee correlates the artificial with remembrances of generational trauma. Sentiment is vital in her work as she questions her personal experiences to construct imposing art. She excavates her lineage by revisiting her family's experiences by using personal and found images to reconstruct slippages in time and history. As layers of images are stacked upon one another, Lee travels through time, commenting on the idea of home, displacement, separation, and how we embrace and conquer loss. Tragic and poetic composites are pieced together to unravel narratives which places her Vietnamese American perspective into a contemporary landscape. Ann Lee was born in San Diego, California, and currently lives and works in Los Angeles, California. So please join me in giving Ann a warm virtual welcome. Thanks, Ann.
Hi. Thank you for having me today. I kind of lost my voice Wednesday, so I'm taking it easy. Hopefully this sounds okay. But yes, thank you for having me. I'm just gonna get right into this. I'm getting right into this lecture. I don't know if it's going to be 30 minutes. It might go over, so I'll skip some slides as we go along. I always over prepare for a lot of things, so bear with me, please. Okay. All right. Zoom. You know, I really do love Zoom. The platform's really cool. Okay. I created this presentation about a month ago, and I just added this slide this morning because today is a very important day in Vietnamese American history, where April 30th, 1975 was the fall of Saigon. And I follow this new wave documentary on social media, and they just have a lot of pertinent information about Vietnamese Americans, Vietnamese that have been dispersed all over the nation. And I just wanted to share this slide with you. I'm thinking about how young Vietnamese people are in America. We're about 46 years old in the United States. Okay. All right, so I created this slide about this PowerPoint about a month ago, and I'm gonna segue just directly into my most current works. And I made a few collages in response to the happenings or the shootings that happened in Atlanta with the spa. And I went on a Stop Asian Hate rally in West Hollywood with the collage that I've created, which which picked up traction with the LA Times. So here is an image of myself and the signage that I've created with this current body of work entitled Model Myth. And I'm not the type of creative to work simultaneously with the news that's happening in the world, but I needed to kind of like dump that energy and that like sadness and anger from my process before starting new work. So that's the way that I process information and energy. It was also printed in the LA Times the following morning. So I'm going to get into, again, my most current works, and it's 3 collages entitled Model Myth from 2021. And I'm just going to read you this information. A model minority is a minority demographic, whether based on ethnicity, race, or religion, whose members are perceived to achieve a higher degree of socioeconomic success than the population average, thus serving as a reference group to outgroups. This success is typically measured relatively by educational attainment, representation in managerial and professional occupations, and household income, along with other socioeconomic indicators such as low criminality and high family marital stability. This was the first collage that was created. And if you, I make note to myself, this was made on March 17th, 2021. I leave myself so many notes because I forget so many things. But this is entitled Vincent Chin. And this collage is about Vincent Chin, a Chinese-American man, on June 19th, 1982, was beaten to death with a baseball bat in Detroit, Michigan, by 2 white men frustrated with the US auto industry's troubles. The 2 were sentenced to 3 years probation in order to pay a $3,000 fine. 2 civil rights trials and a civil suit followed, but neither spent a day in jail. The Vincent Chin case serves as a wake-up call to address anti-Asian bias and racial tolerance. As I was walking through the rally, there was this older gentleman on the sidewalk. He yells out, "Who's Vincent Chin?" Right? And I think, oh, yes, remember those exact words. And when you get home, Google it, because there's a documentary entitled Who's Vincent Chin? Okay. Model Myth, this is a second collage entitled Stockton Schoolyard Shooting 2021. January 1989, among the fatalities were Rathanan Orr, age 9, Graham Chun, age 8, Sokyum An, age 6, Un Lim, age 8, and Thuy Tran, age 6. They were Cambodian and Vietnamese immigrants who came with their families to the US as refugees. The gunman, who had an extended criminal history, shot and killed 5 school children and wounded 32 others. His victims were predominantly Southeast Asian refugees. The attack was a US non-college school shooting with the highest number of fatalities and injuries until the Columbine High School massacre. Of all US school shootings in the 80s, it had the largest number of victims. So these are all appropriated images from the web that I've deconstructed and reconstructed. I'm going to segue. So I'm just going to show you a few pieces from my current works. This is a body of work entitled Loan Words. Loan Words. The adaptation of French loanwords in Vietnamese. Due to the influence of France while Vietnam was a French colony, many French words have been adopted by the Vietnamese. So this is, I realize that I am a research type of person where when an idea comes, I immediately go and research that idea before it just like leaves my mind. And yeah, most of my works are like information based, and then the collage comes. So this image is entitled Bomb, 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 Bomb in Vietnamese, French, and English. And this here is note to self, timeline of colonization and war, and thinking about my parents. And I feel like the majority of my work is made through thinking about my mom, thinking about my parents, thinking about all of the Vietnamese refugee families that have been dispersed like all over the nation. So the French occupied Vietnam from 1887 to 1954. Vietnam was a part of a French colony called French Indochina. The Vietnam-US War started in 61 and ended in 75. My parents were born in Can Tho, Vietnam in 1950, where they spent their first 4 years of life under French rule. From 11 to 25 years old, my parents lived through the war. And at 29, they flee Vietnam with a 3-year-old daughter. So that's like my process on, again, making the work, like envisioning myself through this journey. So this body of work, Loanwords, was created in 2015, but visually then the work didn't make sense to me. So I went back into my archive to rework this body. This is entitled Baton. So batung, baton, baton, again, French, Vietnamese, French, English. And when I go into my collages, I give myself really strict rules of, is it a 2-layered collage? Is it a 3-layered collage? Where does the text live? And I feel like by giving myself those rules, I don't trail off into a segue that wouldn't make sense for me. Foreground image, tactical squad marching through park blocks during 1970 student strike. And this here is just the information on a baton, also known as a nightstick, and its history. But I'm going to read you this last paragraph here. On May 4th, 1970, members of the Ohio National Guard fired into a crowd of demonstrators at Kent State University. 4 people were killed and another 9 were wounded. The group was mostly students protesting the Vietnam War and America's intention to expand the conflict by sending troops into neutral Cambodia. This image is entitled Exang, Essence, Gasoline. Vietnamese, French, and English for the word gasoline. Quote, no news picture in history has generated so much emotion around the world as that one, JFK. So this image here is a very famous image. This is Thich Quang Duc. He was a Vietnamese Mahayana Buddhist monk who burned himself to death at a busy Saigon Road intersection on the 11th of June, 63. He was protesting the persecution of Buddhists by the South Vietnamese Roman Catholic government. Duc is doused with gasoline while calmly sitting down in the traditional Buddhist meditative lotus position, photographed by Malcolm Brown. So I feel like there are about 5 of these collages so far. I needed to take a break from them because it was just overwhelming research. So a lot of my works are works in progress, but the idea is fully there, it's fully finished. Skip through that one. I'm gonna segue into this body of work that I created last summer in June, entitled Tear Escape, Tear Escape. This touches on weapons of warfare used on the landscape globally. Tear gas was first used in World War I in chemical warfare. In 1925, the Geneva Convention categorized tear gas as a chemical warfare agent and banned its use during wartime, but its use by police in the US is still legal. And these are just the titles of each piece. And they're numbered by when they were finished. So this image on the left was the first from this body of work, entitled Jungle Orange Green. Image on the right is entitled Green Monster. And this is a 2-layered image. The background image is a straight photo, and the foreground image are appropriated images of tear gas that I found online. Today, tear gas is the most commonly used form of what's known in law enforcement jargon as less lethal force. Journalists file news stories of tear gas deployment so regularly that pictures of smoke-filled streets have come to feel like stock photography, a theatrical backdrop of protest. Banyan blue, palm orange. Image on the left, purple haze. Image on the right, white. So This body of work was actually a response to a video that I saw during the BLM uprisings in LA. And it was this video from downtown LA where there were protesters and they were kind of like trapped against a fence. They had nowhere to go, but they were being like horribly tear gassed. There was just like so much smoke everywhere. They were being tear gassed by the police. And I didn't want to envision that in a landscape, but thinking about my practice where I do talk a lot about my Vietnamese Americanness, like what would that look like in a landscape? So thinking about those folks in downtown LA being gassed in the city, and then thinking about the families that were gassed in their like home provinces and like small towns in Vietnam. And this body of work emerged from those concepts. Furscape 2020, ongoing. All of my works are ongoing until I stop working on them. So, okay, this is the statement for Furscape. San Diego, Boston, Berlin, Sydney, Hawaii, Paris, Ottawa. The Vietnamese diaspora has established communities in every corner of the world. Some live their new lives as though they were still there. Others preserve more of a distance to their lives before exile. The reopening of the country, Vietnam, at the beginning of the 90s, many of the Viet Kieu, as the people who left are called in their home country, have made the return journey. However, many still shrink back from returning, from the confrontation between their memories and the reality of the country, from the rich of seeing their memories contradicted at every street corner, or of reawakening other memories carefully buried. So this body of work was actually sponsored by Nikon. Like, I don't get sponsored ever, but there was a branding company in LA. They saw my work, they reached out, and they wanted to, like, Nikon had this Z creators and they wanted to rebrand Nikon. I made sure, I sent an email back, are you sure this is the type of work that Nikon is looking for? Because I don't only shoot straight photos, I make collages. So yeah, they are like, yes, we are looking for new voices, we are looking for new folks, let's collaborate. So I got a stipend, they sent me a camera, and I made this body of work, which is still in the realm of my voice, but these images are non-appropriated. They are all shot through a Nikon Z. So image here on the left, Furscape Saigon Blue. Image on the right, Furscape Cafe plus Purple. So this is a 2-layered collage. And these images of the pho storefronts were all photographed here in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and also Westminster, which has a huge Vietnamese population. But this body of work is ongoing because I feel like once, excuse me, once the world opens back up, I plan to travel to like little Saigons or little Hanois throughout the world. I did a Google image map search in the Czech Republic, and there is a little Hanoi plaza in a small city within the Czech Republic. So I feel like, again, this body of work is ongoing because we are everywhere. So as a child of refugee immigrants, our livelihood was built upon pho shops and restaurants, a meld of my upbringing, food, culture, land, and environment. I have fond memories of many birthday parties at my parents' pho restaurant as a kid in San Diego. This stacked scape flattens moments and environments into a reimagined landscape. And this body of work came from, I think it was a late night thought of how did pho happen? Who was the originator of this broth? And then I envisioned this person in a hut in the jungle, just kind of like throwing together these ingredients and boiling water, and pho magically became a thing. So again, this is me re-envisioning those moments, building that bridge between the past and the present. Okay, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to a lot of candid family images. So this is gonna be cute. Okay. Influence. I always get this question of like, how do you make the work? I don't know. It just comes. It just comes and I just run with it. So, influence. My family archive from San Diego to Vietnam. And I have this image on my fridge now. And I always think that it's such a funny image. And to me, it was funny then eating these banh mi's, which is a Vietnamese sandwich on the beach in San Diego, is because I always felt like I wanted more Americanized things like nachos or hot dogs or things like that. But I didn't realize what I was missing until I went back into the archive to take a look at my childhood, where my parents were doing their best and trying to like figure out how to raise Vietnamese American kids in America. So this image here is, this is my younger brother. This is myself here with the red berets, my older sister, and this is our family friend. Mission Beach, San Diego, 1987. My parents also owned a pho restaurant in the mid 80s, early 90s in San Diego, where there was a large Vietnamese community, a lot of like partying, drinking, laughing, just like coming together. A lot of beer, a lot of Budweiser, Sunkist, roasted pig. This is myself here in the foreground, circa 1984. This person here with the striped top is my mom. Okay. I grew up in a city called City Heights, also known as East San Diego. And I didn't realize, again, that it was ranked number 4 in the nation of having like the most Vietnamese Americans in the United States. So this image on the left is an image of my dad, and this is in front of an Asian cinema in City Heights. And this was an image of my dad's pho restaurant grand opening, March 4th, 1988. Family portrait, San Diego to Vietnam, just making note on the similarities and differences within environments and like questioning everything as an adult now, trying to like figure out how we landed in the States and why I am here now making this work. So this is a portrait of my family here on the left, San Diego State, 1982. This is an image of my uncle, my mom's younger brother and his family, same time frame, okay? So this is myself here being held as a baby, and this is my cousin, and we're the same age, but the image is completely, to me, it just feels so detached. I didn't understand all of this like foliage. It didn't make sense to me. The clothes didn't make sense to me. There was like a lot of photos of my extended family, Vietnam barefoot, and I just thought that it was such a vintage old image, but it was around the same time period. So for this lecture, I never knew how to describe this word, which is meow, meow. What is Vietnamese drinking and eating with friends and family called? And I just always remember this word because as a kid, my dad would say, oh, our friends are gonna come over to meow. And I had no idea what that meant. Even when I would visit Vietnam, my family members, we like to gather. It's a huge family. Everyone cooks. There's a lot of beer drinking. So now I can kind of like share this information with you all. Again, image on the left, San Diego, image on the right, my uncles in Vietnam. So my mom was a seamstress like most of my life, and a lot of our clothes were sewn, like hand sewn by my mom. Bottom left image is a candid of my sister and myself, and we had a lot of matching outfits. And I used to be so embarrassed, but it made sense, you know, like it was cheap. We needed to save money. And now, like looking back on it, like I would wear that. That looks like great loungewear. I would wear that at home. It looks cozy. It's probably cotton. It's good for your skin. But I think as a kid, you're just like so embarrassed of like, I wasn't like embarrassed of my culture. It wasn't that. It's just like I didn't know what my culture was. Image on the right. In every home we lived in San Diego, my dad would hang this flag, which is a South Vietnamese flag, South Vietnamese freedom flag for all of the South Vietnamese people. And I didn't realize what that was until I went back into the archive to like do that research and kind of like teach myself that information. So this is how the work happens. I sit, I look through images, I ask a lot of questions. I talk to my parents. I ask them about their journey, what it was like back home. Portrait of my dad, portrait of my grandfathers. Image on the left, mom posing in front yard in front of structures. This is my mom's mom here on the right. Image of my mom on the left in San Diego. Also, living in a lot of apartments in San Diego, my dad would build all of these like structures to grow vegetables, and it would just grow. So I feel like a lot of Vietnamese people have that like green thumb to just grow anything, anywhere. Again, a lot of just researching and a lot of looking at portraits, candids, foliage. So my dad was a portrait photographer in Saigon before the fall. And when the fall happened, the Viet Cong took over his portrait studio. And then like naturally, my parents fled to on boat to, I think they like fled to like Malaysia, to Canada, to California. So when we settled in San Diego, my dad still picked up a camera, and that's why we have like so many. That's why we have like so many candids of my childhood, which is really fortunate because there are a lot of other Vietnamese American people my age that don't have the luxuries of looking back into their archive. So in terms of also like influence, yes, the candid images really influenced and like sparked curiosity. But I think this is like the #1 image that sparked curiosity for me was this single image here that I have. I have this framed in my home. And this image is of my mom and my older sister. And this is an image of them at a refugee camp in Malaysia in 1978. And on the back of this image, it reads, "In Malaysia." So from there, I assume that this was a portrait of, again, my sister and my mom in Malaysia. And yeah, I would go back and ask my parents about, you know, their journey. And then from there, I would reconstruct a visual narrative on how to tell this oral story that my parents have given me. Yeah, it's a lot. I do a lot of research, and it's just, you know, you just learn so much about yourself. So here is a postcard that is addressed to my dad. And this was when they were sponsored by a church in White Rock, Canada. And this was dated February 26, 1980. It reads, "Dear everyone, greetings from Barbados, where it's warm and sunny, 85 degrees. I swim in the sea every day and really enjoying it. We'll be back in White Rock around 8th of March. Hope all is well with you and that you are keeping well and learning English fast. Susie." So Susie was my parents' host person. Before the pandemic, I went to Vancouver for the first time. And Vancouver is about like an hour from White Rock. And I Googled the image. I went to go look at the house. I drove in front of the house and I just sat there for a second, but it was just way too dark, way too late for a stranger to knock on a stranger's door. So I'll leave that to another time. It would just be another body of work. But again, I think this is just so important in terms of like research. We would get a lot of airmail with this like specific envelopes, and I thought like every person in America had these envelopes, but it was just really like specific to families that had families overseas. I didn't realize that as a kid. Okay, how many slides do we have left? Okay, 55 slides, 15 more slides. Okay, portrait of my father, portrait of my mom. This is a body of work entitled Portrait Bomb. Image on the left, Mother Lotus. Image on the right, Father Chrysanthemum. So there's a huge collaboration with the archive, my dad's archive, and kind of like repurposing those images. This one's entitled Agent Bomb on the left. Image on the right is the original portrait of my mom. Okay. So the image that was appropriated is 4 Ranch Hand C-123 aircraft spraying liquid Agent Orange defoliant in South Vietnam. Portrait bomb, field bomb. There's this body of work entitled World Wars, which I created in 2019-20. And it layers documentations of families, soldiers, and individuals in Vietnam during the war, with family photographs of my own mother and siblings. The cumulative effect of this imagery evokes the importance of personal and collective remembrance. By digitally rebuilding temporal and historical disruptions, I comment on the idea of home, displacement, separation, and how we embrace and conquer loss. Tragic and poetic composites unravel narratives and place my Vietnamese American perspective into a contemporary landscape. This image here is personally entitled World War Mothers. Background image, single mother with her 3 children in between boat rescue. This one is entitled World War Apartment. Mom and daughters after being rescued from a naval ship. World War Backyard. US military in a field of color-coded pink smoke. World War Beach. Top image, Vietnamese family hiding from gunfire. Bottom image, military coming upon shore with weapons. I think this is going to be the last body of work that I'm going to show or talk about. So this body of work is entitled Home Faux Family Album. And I started this in 2011 while in grad school, but my advisors were not into this. I was working on another body of work that I like hit a wall with the other body of work, so I needed to take a break. I started on this new body of work just to like dump some, like process some information. Yeah, it didn't sit well with them. I stopped working on the work. Then I re-picked up the work back in 2019. In this body of work home, I created a series of faux family portraits. I scanned in old family photographs of my relatives in Vietnam and paired them with images of family homes I photographed throughout Los Angeles. By doing this, I'm fabricating a substitute family photo album, thinking of the many displaced families and individuals that have escaped in search of asylum. The language in my work touches on separation and bridges the question of what came before and what's to follow. So I don't share the original candidates often. So image on the right is the original candid. And I love that like in every culture, we have our family photos in front of like the home, in the yard, in front of a structure. This is my grandmother in the center with her sisters. These are my maternal grandparents. Okay, so influence. I just wanted to share this like stack of books as like my current influences. And I feel as an artist, when I was a new artist, just like making work, I didn't realize that it didn't feel like there were like a lot of Vietnamese American artists making work. But now I see that there are more emerging. So here are a few um, artists, creatives that influence my work. Thi Bui, graphic novelist, Ocean Vuong, writer, Viet Thanh Nguyen, writer, Quinn Nguyen Lee, young Vietnamese filmmaker. And I came across this young Vietnamese French collage artist, Prune Phi, in social media. The current films that I think about often are In the Mood for Love. I think the cinematography is just so beautiful. Current film, Minari. I love a good coming of age drama. This is my last slide. This is an image of myself and my mom last year in La Jolla. And this is an image of myself and my mom from 1982 at San Diego State. So I'm gonna end my share.
And I'm curious to know, how is your family comfortable? I assume they are, but are they comfortable with the fact that you use their archives and use their likeness and their images in your work? Or have you ever bumped up against any sort of tension over that issue?
I feel like when my mom and my dad first saw my work in a postcard, it was for a show, and they didn't understand what was happening, because it's not like a traditional image. It's like an image that has been manipulated. So at first they're questioning, why is this mass produced? Why is this mass produced? They questioned, why is it important? I think the huge part of it was just confusion, right? And I think my parents' generation, where they like came to America to like survive, and now like they're the next generation, which is my generation, we do have that luxury to like research and make the work. So I don't think there are like any heads that are bumped. It's more so I've sat down with them. I had to like slowly tell them what I do. And there's also a language barrier. My Vietnamese is not all that great, and their English is not all that great. So I had to like slowly tell them, hey, this is my practice. This is what I teach. This is what I talk about. It's important because there's not a lot of people are talking about this now. And if I don't talk about it, then it might be like lost in the next generations. So I think right now, in terms of, are they okay with seeing their likeness out in the world? I think right now it's neutral. I think I will always have that conversation with them on like why I'm using the archive.
Here's something in the chat from Cindy. I can read that. The World War images remind me of Martha, I'm going to say this wrong. Oh, no, Martha Rolser, with the mixing of war and domestic imagery. Do you consider your work in conversation with the history of feminist art?
Yeah, Cindy, I think so. I think there are a few works that do touch on the history of feminism and also like the political nature of work. But also, again, I'm thinking about my mom a lot when I make the work. So it's going to always have that that sentiment. So yes.
You mentioned that you have visited Vietnam at least once, right? Probably more. But how has, I think it's interesting how you talked about the fact that for a lot of your family, the idea of returning is such a mixed bag. It's so full of like fear and trauma and this sort of sadness about the way things have changed. So you are obviously the family historian, in addition to being an artist. You're obviously very connected to the family archives. So I'm curious to know if you had any of that same kind of reaction, when you went back. I know you didn't have those memories necessarily, but you're still carrying that imagery with you. So I'm curious to know what that experience was like.
My first trip back to Vietnam was, I think, in 2004, 2005. And I definitely did want to go back, but there are other chances to go back as a teenager, but I don't know why I was fighting the 15-hour flight as a teenager, so I didn't go the first time around. But my first trip in the early 2000s, like I didn't have any expectations, right? And I wanted to like understand more of the culture and my family and like how they couldn't flee or they couldn't leave. And now they're not stuck. I don't want to call it stuck because they love their lives there, you know? But I think as the next generation, we are so curious on what it's like what is our homeland like? What is the motherland like? What does it smell like? How will people perceive you? So as a curious person, I was kind of like open to all of that information with like open arms, like I'm going to embrace everything and like take a lot of notes. But I think that first time back, I wasn't really making collages. I was I took a lot of portraits, right, of my family and like a lot of images of landscape. But I've been back a total of 3 times, and I feel like every time I'm like learning more and more about the space. But I think like for my parents, it was just hard for them because they like lived through all that, you know? And also like talking to my peers that are the same age that are talking about this type of information in their artworks, their parents feel the same way. Like they never want to go back because they have like this idea of what it was when they left. So the change was really hard for them. The change was hard for my dad. He was very like mad. There are like certain words that you can't say, like you shouldn't say Viet Cong in Vietnam because it's supposed to be negative. So you're supposed to call them the police, right? And my dad was like, they're not the police. Like they harmed us. They are the Viet Cong. So it's hard to go back with my dad because he will cause ruckus, right? And we have to like be there too. Like, okay, Dad, like we don't want you to get stuck here. You need to come back to the States after our holiday is over. So there are a lot of things that are happening.
I have a question for you. Yeah, so like you, many of our students are first generation college students. Is there any advice that you could share with our students who might be interested in pursuing a career in the arts?
Yeah, I'm kind of like I'm torn here. I think if you want to pursue a career in the arts, yes, do it. I can't say like form a voice sooner than later because like it would be great if I formed my voice sooner than later because then I'd be like projected by now. But I feel like this projection is like on time for me now, right? But I feel like as a first gen, do it, right? Do a lot of writing, do some research, talk to your elders, make fun work, right? I feel like this work doesn't, from an outsider's point of view, it might not look fun because it's a lot of like sadness, but it's really fun for me to like deconstruct all of this history and like reconstruct it to my like visual liking, right? So I'm like remaking history right now that can be in like art history books. So I think, yes, those first gen students, what do you want to talk about? Let's talk about it and like, let's make it great. Also, don't stress yourselves out about money, right? Like look for that financial aid. This is real, right? Look for that financial aid. There are grants out there and scholarships. But I think like the number one thing is like, do what you want respectfully.
So you talked about how the work is fun, but earlier, you also talked about how it's, it's like heavy stuff. It's like heavy, you're heavy lifting in the work. So I don't know if I'm going to articulate this well, but I'm curious, like, how do you take care of yourself in creating this work that is so powerful and heavy?
That's a really good question. So the fun part of this is I'm learning a lot about myself, right? Where I am naturally a crier. Like I cry a lot in critiques. I cried a lot in undergraduate and graduate studies. And like I've grown comfortable with that. Like I'm just gonna cry, it's happening, right? It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna let it go and then it'll pass. So as I'm making the work, that will initially happen. And I think it's strange where I go through these moments where it's like, I'm really sad, I'm really mad, I'm really angry. And then that makes the work really great. So I like channel that energy. But that is exhausting. You know, you're dehydrated. You don't want to like turn on the computer to make the work. So for me, there's a lot of downtime where I'm just like sitting. I text this a lot to a lot of my friends. Hey, they're like, hey, what are you doing? And it's like night, like 8 p.m. the sunset. Well, I'm just sitting on the couch in the dark with the candle lit. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm great. So I think it's like my form of meditation where I'm just like in complete silence, or I go to a lot of bars. I drink a lot of cocktails. When the world opens again or prior to the pandemic, I would go see a lot of art. I think that really helps flesh out a lot of my like information that I'm going through. I go on like a lot of holidays. So there is like a huge aspect of me like dumping that energy that I'm putting into the work. I'm gonna talk about this a bit more, where I was on the phone with someone and they asked the same question. They're like, how do you seek therapy or counseling? And my response was like, no, because I put it into the work. And then he brought up David Lynch, and he says David Lynch doesn't seek therapy or counseling because he feels like that's going to kill the work, right? And then I'm just sitting there on the phone like, that's how I feel. But you know, I could be wrong. I can seek therapy and counseling, and like my work can like segue to like higher platform. But yeah, there's this other side where I like zen out. When I'm out in the world, I like zen out my brain. I like think about nothing. I'm in the present moment. But when I'm doing the work, it's like 100% in the work.
Speaking of your work and things being heavy, this past year's been kind of challenging. I mean, with the pandemic, obviously, racial upheaval, unrest, the emerging public health crisis that will definitely outlast where we're at now with COVID. How has the past year changed your studio practice? I wonder if you're willing to dive into that.
I also teach college, so it's what are we, 2021? I think that my Zoom, being on a computer with students and Zooming is a lot of work. It's like way more work than a lot of people think it is. And then getting on the same computer to try to make the work is hard, because I don't even want to turn on the computer most days because I'm on it all day. So I think it's definitely changed my rigor. I don't get on the computer much as of late. Like this year, I feel like I'll get on if I'm like really upset about something and I need to like flesh out that energy. But yeah, I think this year the pandemic has made me work less on my practice. I'm in the same space all day long. So I don't know. I need to like figure that out for myself for like later this year and next year and the following years. But it's difficult to like live in your studio and work in your studio and teach in your studio. So once it's safe to like go back to teaching, I think that dynamic is going to shift for me.
So when thinking about the future, I know you're talking about how you're not creating at the same level that you once were, but is there anything sort of on the horizon that you could share with us that you have coming up?
Yeah. Okay, so I should be working on this. I'm not working on this, but I feel like as artists, we're like natural procrastinators, and I'll just knock it out. So fall 2021, I'm going to be in a 2-person group show at Texas Christian University. They have a contemporary museum on campus with another Vietnamese American artist that's based in California. So yeah, we are in the works of like the logistics of accommodations, and like if I go for artist lectures or studio visits, Yeah, but right now I am thinking about the work, but I'm not physically making any of the work. But I think, yeah, I have like a year and a half. I think like by fall this year, I'll start like drafting out the work. But that's my one big thing. I think like for now, it's just like a lot of Zooms that have happened. And I'm teaching many courses this fall. So right now is like downtime I'm just relaxing right now. I need to not do anything for maybe like 2 weeks.
Good for you. And thinking is a big part of that practice, right?
Yeah.
It's not given enough credit.
Yeah,
It's
it's
important.
hard. It's hard to think about things. Making them is cool because I think like the more you think about them, you're like, okay, I know how to process this. Okay, this is gonna look great. Okay, this makes sense. So I'm not the type of person to like jump into the making. I need to like do all of the brain work first.
Absolutely. Well, I have many more questions, but I think you and I will have to chat at another time. We'll have to have you back. But I want to thank you so much for your time and creativity and energy today, and thank everyone who attended today and spent a little bit of their afternoon with us. We appreciate you. So reminder to all of you who are here today, Roman's putting some links in the chat. We'd really appreciate if you take 2 minutes to do the survey. Thanks everybody, and please take good care.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay healthy, please. Stay hydrated.